The blood-red sunset painted the horizon as Olivia Summers stood trembling in the middle of Willits, California, her wrists bound with coarse rope that chafed against her skin. Tears streamed down her dirt-smudged face as her husband of 6 months, Jasper Kane, exchanged final words with a burly stranger who was inspecting the teeth of a magnificent Palomino horse. "She's worth more than this horse," Olivia cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. "How could you do this?" Jasper wouldn't meet her eyes. He simply pocketed the few gold coins the stranger had added to sweeten the deal and mounted his own horse. "Times are hard, Liv. Man's gotta survive," he called over his shoulder before spurring his mount and disappearing into the gathering dusk of 1876. The stranger yanked on Olivia's bindings, but before he could drag her away, a deep voice cut through the evening air. "That's not how we treat ladies in Willits." Olivia turned to see a tall cowboy dismounting from his chestnut stallion. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. "This ain't your business, mister," the stranger growled, pulling Olivia closer. The cowboy stepped forward into the light cast by the saloon's lanterns. "I'm making it my business." He removed his hat, revealing piercing blue eyes and sun-bleached hair. "Name's Ethan Steele, and I don't take kindly to men treating women like property." "I paid fair and square for her," the stranger argued, tightening his grip on Olivia's arm. Ethan's hand hovered near the Colt revolver on his hip. "She said he sold her for a horse. Well, I'll buy her back with my life if need be." The stranger sized up Ethan, noting the confident stance and the weathered look of a man who'd seen his share of violence. After a tense moment, he spat on the ground. "Fine, but I want double what I paid, plus the horse." "You'll get your money," Ethan replied evenly. "Now cut her loose." As the ropes fell away, Olivia rubbed her raw wrists, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified of this new man who just claimed her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant piano music drifting from the saloon. "Don't thank me yet, miss," Ethan replied, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "Let's get you someplace safe first." Olivia had arrived in California just 7 months earlier, a mail-order bride full of hope and naive dreams. The man who'd met her at the stagecoach had seemed charming enough, Jasper Kane, with his smooth talk and promises of a comfortable life. But the small cabin he'd taken her to was nothing like the home he'd described in his letters, and his true nature had emerged soon after the wedding. Now, as she walked beside Ethan Steele toward the town's only hotel, she wondered if she'd simply traded one nightmare for another. "I don't have any money," she said softly, "and I won't. I mean, I'm not going to." "Madam," Ethan interrupted, his tone gentle but firm, "I'm not expecting anything from you. What that man did, what your husband did, it wasn't right. I'm just offering you a safe place to stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." The lobby of the Willits Hotel was modest but clean. The elderly clerk barely looked up from his newspaper as Ethan requested 2 separate rooms. "Only got 1 room left," the clerk muttered. "2 beds, though." Ethan glanced at Olivia, who stood with her arms wrapped around herself, looking small and vulnerable in her dusty dress. "I'll take the room," Ethan decided. "I'll sleep in the chair." Upstairs, the room was simple, 2 narrow beds with iron frames, a washstand with a porcelain basin, and a worn armchair by the window. Olivia stood awkwardly near the door while Ethan placed his saddlebags on the floor. "You can have the beds," he said, gesturing toward them. "I've slept in worse places than that chair," Olivia nodded, still uncertain. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. "You don't know me." Ethan moved to the window, looking out at the town that was settling into night. My sister was treated poorly by her husband. Nobody stepped in to help her. He turned to face Olivia, his expression solemn. I was too far away to do anything. By the time I got there, she was gone. I'm sorry, Olivia whispered. It was a long time ago, but I promised myself I'd never stand by again if I saw someone needing help. He moved toward the door. I'll give you some privacy. There's a dining room downstairs. I'll bring up some food. When he'd gone, Olivia sank onto one of the beds, her hands shaking. She'd been so certain she was about to become another man's property or worse. Instead, this stranger had shown her more kindness in an hour than Jasper had in months. She used the water from the basin to wash her face and hands, wincing at the raw skin on her wrists. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she hardly recognized herself. Her once vibrant brown eyes were dull with fear, and her honey blonde hair hung limp around her face. At 22, Olivia had already endured more than most women twice her age. Orphaned at 16, she'd worked as a seamstress in Boston until she'd saved enough for the train ticket west. Jasper's letters had painted pictures of a thriving ranch and a gentle man looking for partnership, not servitude. The reality had been a dilapidated cabin, mounting debts, and increasingly cruel behavior. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Miss Summers. I've brought some food, Ethan called. Olivia opened the door to find him balancing a tray with 2 plates of stew, bread, and 2 cups of coffee. It's not fancy, but it's hot, he said, setting the tray on the small table. Thank you. She sat across from him, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. They ate in silence for a few minutes before she gathered the courage to ask. What happens tomorrow? Ethan considered this. Well, that depends on you. You have family somewhere you could go to, she shook her head. No. My parents died years ago. I came west to marry Jasper because I had nowhere else. The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. What can you do? Any skills? I'm a good seamstress, and I can cook and keep house. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Willits has a dressmaker who might need help. Or there's the hotel in the next town over there always looking for staff. He paused. Or, I have a small ranch about half a day's ride from here. It's nothing special, but I have a spare room. You could stay there until you figure out what you want to do next. Olivia studied him. Ethan Steele was handsome. She couldn't deny that, tall and broad-shouldered with a quiet strength about him. His clothes were well-worn but clean, and despite the gun on his hip, there was something gentle in his eyes. Why would you do that for a stranger? She asked. Because I know what it's like to be alone in the world, he answered simply. And everybody deserves a chance to start over. Olivia considered her options, which were painfully few. She had no money, no friends in this unfamiliar town, and no guarantee that Jasper wouldn't return, possibly with a vengeance. I accept your offer, she said finally, but only until I can find work and support myself. Ethan nodded. That's fair. We'll head out tomorrow morning. As promised, Ethan slept in the chair, his long legs stretched out before him and his hat tipped over his face. Olivia lay awake for hours, listening to his steady breathing and wondering what twist of fate had brought this man into her life on the very day she needed saving. Dawn broke with a golden hue that spilled through the thin curtains. Olivia woke to find Ethan already up and dressed, his saddlebags packed. Morning, he said, tipping his hat. I've arranged for breakfast downstairs, and I bought you this. He held out a simple cotton dress. Figured you might want something fresh. Olivia touched the fabric, moved by the thoughtfulness. Thank you, I'll repay you as soon as I can. No rush, he replied, heading for the door. Take your time, I'll meet you downstairs. After washing and changing into the new dress, Olivia felt somewhat restored. The dress was a touch big but clean and unmarked by Jasper's hands that alone made it precious. Downstairs, Ethan was waiting with 2 plates of eggs and bacon. They ate quickly, and soon they were mounting Ethan's chestnut stallion, Thunder. Olivia sat behind him, holding onto the saddle, careful not to touch him more than necessary. "It's about 4 hours to my place," Ethan explained as they rode out of town. "We'll stop midway to rest and water the horse." The California landscape opened before them, rolling hills dotted with oak trees, vast meadows sprinkled with wildflowers. After months in Jasper's isolated cabin, the open space felt liberating to Olivia. "Have you lived in Willits long?" she asked, trying to fill the silence. "About 5 years. Came west after the war. You fought in the Civil War." "Yes, madam, Union side. Wasn't much left for me back in Pennsylvania when it ended." He adjusted his hat against the rising sun. "What about you? Where were you before you came west?" "Boston. I worked for a dressmaker there, but after my parents died, the city felt suffocating." She hesitated. Jasper's letters made California sound like paradise. "The West has a way of making liars out of men," Ethan said. "It's beautiful, but it's hard country. Takes more than just dreams to make it here." They stopped by a small creek around midday. While Thunder drank, Ethan shared jerky and dried apples from his saddlebags. "Tell me about your ranch," Olivia said, sitting on a sun-warmed rock. "It's modest. 50 acres. Got about 20 head of cattle, a few horses. A small garden that could use a woman's touch if I'm being honest." He smiled slightly. "The house is simple, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting area. Not grand, but it's paid for." "It sounds lovely," Olivia said, surprising herself with her sincerity. After Jasper's broken promises, even a humble but honest home sounded like heaven. "It's quiet," Ethan warned. "Nearest neighbor is 2 miles away. Town's a good hour's ride. Quiet sounds perfect right now." They resumed their journey, and by mid-afternoon, Ethan pointed to a distant cluster of buildings nestled against a hillside. "That's it, Steele Ranch." As they drew closer, Olivia saw a modest but well-maintained farmhouse with a wide porch, a barn, and several fenced pastures where cattle grazed. A small creek meandered through the property, and a garden plot sat near the house, showing signs of care if not expertise. "You've done all this yourself?" she asked as they dismounted. "Mostly. Hired help during roundup and branding." He led Thunder to the barn. "Come on, I'll show you the house." Inside, the farmhouse was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a worn sofa and 2 chairs arranged before it. Bookshelves lined another wall, surprising Olivia with their number of volumes. "You read a lot?" she asked, running her fingers along the spines. "Winter nights get long out here," Ethan replied. "Books are good company." He showed her to the spare bedroom, small but tidy, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the garden. "It's not much," he said, sounding almost apologetic. "It's perfect," Olivia assured him, thinking of the cramped, drafty room she'd shared with Jasper. "Thank you. I'll let you settle in. Kitchen's stocked, but I usually have a simple supper. Don't stand on ceremony on my account." Left alone, Olivia sat on the bed and looked around the room that would be hers, at least temporarily. For the first time since arriving in California, she felt a glimmer of hope. Not happiness, not yet, the wounds were too fresh for that, but hope was a start. That evening, she found her way to the kitchen and began exploring the cupboards. Despite Ethan's warning of simplicity, she found enough ingredients to prepare a decent meal: salt pork, potatoes, carrots, and flour for biscuits. When Ethan came in from tending the animals, he stopped short at the sight of the set table and the aroma of cooking food. "You didn't have to do this," he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I wanted to," Olivia replied, suddenly shy. "It's the least I can do." They ate together, the silence more comfortable than it had been on the journey. After the meal, Ethan insisted on washing the dishes while Olivia dried them. "Tomorrow I can show you around the property," he offered, "and I need to ride into town for supplies in a few days. You can come along, meet some folks, see if there's work that interests you." "I'd like that," Olivia said, though the thought of returning to town, where Jasper might find her, sent a flutter of anxiety through her chest. As she prepared for bed that night, Olivia caught her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Some of the fear had left her eyes, replaced by something she couldn't quite name: determination, perhaps, or the first hint of strength returning. The days fell into a gentle rhythm. Olivia helped with the household chores and took over the garden, which flourished under her attentive care. Ethan worked from sunrise to sunset, tending the cattle, mending fences, and handling the countless tasks required to keep the ranch running. They circled each other carefully, maintaining a polite distance. Ethan never entered her room, and he was unfailingly courteous. But Olivia caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her heart beat faster. A week after her arrival, they rode into the nearest town, Oak Valley, for supplies. The general store owner, Mrs. Peterson, took an immediate liking to Olivia. "We don't see many new faces around here," the older woman said as she wrapped parcels of sugar and coffee. "Especially not young ladies." "Miss Summers is staying at my ranch for a while," Ethan explained. "She's looking for work, possibly as a seamstress." Mrs. Peterson brightened. "Is that so? My sister-in-law runs the dress shop down the street. She's been complaining about falling behind on orders. You should speak with her." By the time they left Oak Valley that afternoon, Olivia had secured part-time work with Mrs. Peterson's sister-in-law, starting the following week. "I can ride you into town on the days you work," Ethan offered as they headed back to the ranch. "It's on the way to where I often sell our beef." "You've done so much for me already," Olivia said. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Having someone else around the place is payment enough," he replied. "Gets lonely out there sometimes." As they crested a hill, the ranch came into view, golden in the late afternoon light. Olivia felt a strange tug in her chest, something like belonging, though she knew the feeling was premature. This wasn't her home. It was a temporary refuge, nothing more. Yet as the weeks passed, the line between refuge and home began to blur. Olivia worked 3 days a week in Oak Valley, where her skill with a needle quickly earned her a reputation. The rest of the time, she kept house for Ethan and tended the garden, which was now producing more vegetables than they could eat. "We should preserve some of this for winter," she suggested one evening as they sat on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "We," Ethan echoed, giving her a sidelong glance. Olivia flushed. "I mean, if I'm still here." "I know this arrangement isn't permanent." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "It could be," he finally said, his voice low, "if you wanted." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders were coming up the path to the house, their figures silhouetted against the setting sun. Ethan stood, his hand moving instinctively toward the gun he wore even at home. "Stay here," he told Olivia, stepping off the porch. As the riders drew closer, Olivia's blood ran cold. The man in the lead was Jasper. "Well, well," Jasper called, reining in his horse. "Took a while to track you down, Liv. Seems you've made yourself quite comfortable here." Ethan stood his ground. "You're not welcome on my property, Kane. The lady doesn't want to see you," Jasper sneered. "The lady is my wife, and I'll be taking her back now." "No," Olivia said, stepping off the porch to stand beside Ethan. "I'm not going anywhere with you, Jasper. You sold me, remember, for a horse. A transaction I've come to regret." Jasper replied, his eyes cold. Fortunately, I've brought friends to help remedy that mistake. The two men with him shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons. 3 against 1, Ethan observed calmly. Not very sporting. This isn't about sport, Jasper spat. It's about what's mine. She doesn't belong to anyone, Ethan said, his voice steel. Jasper's hand moved toward his gun, but Ethan was faster. In a fluid motion, he drew and fired a warning shot into the ground near Jasper's horse, causing the animal to rear. Next one won't miss, Ethan promised. Now get off my land. Jasper struggled to control his frightened horse. This isn't over, Steele. A man has rights. Not to sell human beings, Ethan replied. If you ever set foot on my property again, I'll have the sheriff arrest you for trespassing. And if you ever touch Miss Summers again, they won't find enough of you to bury. Something in Ethan's tone, a cold certainty that came from a man who had seen and dealt death before, made Jasper hesitate. After a tense moment, he yanked his horse around. You'll regret this, he threatened, before spurring his mount and galloping away, his companions following. When they had disappeared from sight, Olivia realized she was trembling. Ethan turned to her, his expression softening from steel to concern. Are you all right? She nodded, though tears threatened. He'll be back. Probably, Ethan agreed, gently leading her back to the porch. But we'll be ready, and in the meantime there's something we should consider. What's that? A divorce. He held up a hand when she started to protest. I know good lawyers in Sacramento. California has laws that allow women to divorce on grounds of cruelty or abandonment. Selling your wife certainly qualifies. Hope flared in Olivia's chest. Is that possible? Really possible? It won't be easy, Ethan warned. But yes, it's possible. It will take time and money, but... He hesitated. I'm willing to help with both. Why? Olivia asked, the question that had been on her mind since he first intervened in Willits. Why do all this for me? Ethan looked away, his profile strong against the darkening sky. Because I've come to care for you, Olivia. More than I should, perhaps. The admission hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Olivia felt something unfurl in her chest, a warmth she'd thought had died with her parents, a feeling of safety she'd never found with Jasper. I care for you too, she whispered, but I'm still married, and Jasper is dangerous. We'll handle Jasper, Ethan assured her, and the marriage. Well, one step at a time. That night, Olivia lay awake, her mind racing. The thought of being free of Jasper filled her with both hope and terror. And then there was Ethan Kind, steady Ethan who had asked for nothing but had given her everything she needed. Safety, respect, and time to heal. She was falling in love with him. The realization should have frightened her after what she'd endured with Jasper, but instead, it felt like coming home after a long journey. The next morning, Ethan rode into Oak Valley to speak with the town's telegraph operator. He returned with news that he'd sent messages to contacts in Sacramento about Olivia's situation. It may take a few weeks to get a response, he explained over lunch, but it's a start. Olivia nodded, grateful for his determination. I should continue working, she said. To contribute to the legal costs, if that's what you want, but don't feel obligated. I do want to, she insisted. I need to stand on my own feet again. Ethan's eyes softened. You're already standing, Olivia, taller than most. That afternoon, as Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard, she spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon. Her heart raced, thinking Jasper had returned with more men. She ran to the barn where Ethan was repairing tack. Riders coming, she said breathlessly. Ethan immediately stood, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the wall. Get inside the house. Use the shotgun if necessary. But as the riders approached, Ethan relaxed. It's just Ben Taylor and some of his hands, he told Olivia, neighboring rancher. Good man. Ben Taylor was a weathered man in his 50s, with a salt and pepper beard and kind eyes. He tipped his hat to Olivia before turning to Ethan. Heard you had some trouble yesterday, Steele. Jasper Kane's been shooting his mouth off at the saloon in Willits about taking back his wife and teaching you a lesson. Ethan's jaw tightened. Thanks for the warning, Ben. Not just a warning, an offer of help. Ben gestured to the 4 men with him. Kane's gathering a crew. Word is he's planning to hit your place tomorrow night. Thought you might appreciate some extra guns. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Ethan stepped closer to her, his presence reassuring. I appreciate that, Ben, but I can't ask you to risk your men in my fight. Ben snorted. You're not asking, I'm offering. Besides, no decent man stands by while a woman's treated like property. My boys feel the same. The men nodded in agreement. Then I accept, Ethan said, extending his hand, and I'm grateful. After discussing strategy, Ben and his men rode off to return after nightfall. Ethan turned to Olivia, his expression grave. You should leave, he said. I can have one of Ben's men take you to Oak Valley until this is over. Olivia shook her head firmly. No, I'm tired of running from Jasper. This is as much my fight as yours. Olivia, I can use a gun, she interrupted. My father taught me before he died. I'm staying, Ethan. He studied her face, seeing the determination there. Finally, he nodded. All right, but you stay in the house, away from windows. They spent the rest of the day preparing boarding up windows, moving furniture to create barriers, cleaning and loading every weapon on the property. By nightfall, Ben and his men had returned, bringing extra ammunition and provisions. Kane's got about 10 men, Ben reported. Not all gunmen, mostly drifters looking for easy money, but they are armed and mean. Ethan positioned the men around the property, 2 in the barn, 1 in the root cellar that had a clear view of the approach, the others in strategic positions near the house. Olivia stayed in the kitchen, a shotgun across her lap, watching the back door. The hours crept by. Midnight came and went. The ranch was silent except for the occasional low of cattle or the soft nickering of horses. Maybe they're not coming, Olivia whispered when Ethan checked on her. They'll come, he replied grimly. Kane's pride won't let him back down now. He was right. Just before dawn, when the sky was beginning to lighten in the east, a shot rang out. One of Ben's men, positioned as a lookout, fired a warning. They're coming, he shouted. From the west. Ethan rushed to the front of the house, rifle ready. Through the gap in the boarded windows, Olivia saw riders emerging from the tree line, galloping toward the ranch. Hold your fire until they're closer, Ethan commanded. The riders fanned out as they approached, some heading for the barn, others for the house. When they were about 50 yards away, Ben gave the signal, and the defenders opened fire. 2 of Kane's men fell immediately. The others scattered, seeking cover behind rocks and trees. The gunfight that followed was chaotic, muzzle flashes in the dim light, the crack of rifles, shouts, and curses. Olivia remained at her post, watching the back door. When she heard footsteps on the porch, she raised the shotgun. The door crashed open, and a man she didn't recognize burst in, pistol drawn. Without hesitation, she fired. The blast knocked the intruder backward off the porch. Olivia's hands shook as she reloaded, but her resolve didn't waver. She had survived too much to surrender now. Outside, the gunfire was intensifying. Through the window, she could see Ethan moving from cover to cover, firing with deadly precision. Ben and his men were holding their own, but Kane's crew outnumbered them. Then she spotted Jasper, crouching behind the water trough, taking aim at Ethan's exposed back. "Ethan," she screamed. "Behind you!" He dove sideways just as Jasper fired, the bullet splintering the wood where Ethan had been standing. Rolling to his feet, Ethan aimed and fired in one smooth motion. Jasper jerked backward, clutching his shoulder, but remained upright. The gunfight continued for what seemed like hours, but was probably only minutes. Gradually, the attackers' fire slackened as men fell or retreated. Finally, someone among Kane's men shouted for a ceasefire. "Kane," Ethan called, "it's over, take your wounded and go." There was a pause, then Jasper's voice strained with pain. "This isn't over, Steele." "Yes, it is," Ethan replied. "The sheriff from Oak Valley will be here by noon. I sent for him yesterday. You want to explain to him why you led an armed attack on my ranch, or why you sold your wife for a horse." Silence followed, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Then came the sound of horses being mounted, and soon the remaining attackers were galloping away, several slumped in their saddles. When the dust had settled, Olivia rushed outside to find Ethan. He was helping one of Ben's men who had taken a bullet to the leg. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ethan looked up, relief washing over his face when he saw her unharmed. "For now," he said. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "I shot someone at the back door." "You did what you had to do," Ethan said gently. "We all did." Ben approached, a bloody bandage around his arm. "Kane's running with his tail between his legs, but he'll be back if he isn't arrested first." "The sheriff will be here soon," Ethan reassured him. "And I have friends in Sacramento who will make sure Kane answers for what he's done." As promised, Sheriff Davis from Oak Valley arrived before noon, bringing a doctor for the wounded. He took statements from everyone, his face growing grimmer as the full story unfolded. "I'll put out wanted notices for Kane and his men," the sheriff promised. "Attempted murder, assault, trespassing, he'll hang or spend years in prison once we catch him." The doctor tended the wounded, none of whom, thankfully, had life-threatening injuries. 2 of Ben's men had been hit, and Ethan had a graze along his ribs that Olivia insisted on bandaging herself. As she wrapped the linen around his torso, her fingers trembling slightly, Ethan caught her hand. "You were brave today," he said softly. "Braver than most men I've known." Olivia shook her head. "I was terrified. Being brave isn't about not feeling fear. It's about doing what needs to be done despite it." He squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Olivia." That evening, after Ben and his men had left and the sheriff had departed with promises to return once Jasper was apprehended, Ethan and Olivia sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "We wait for word from Sacramento about the divorce proceedings," Ethan replied. "And we stay vigilant. Kane might be wounded, but he's still dangerous." "And us?" Olivia ventured. "What happens with us?" Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "That depends on you. I've made no secret of my feelings, Olivia, but you've been through a lot. I won't rush you." "What if I don't want to wait?" she asked, her heart pounding. "What if I know exactly what I want?" A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. "And what is it you want, Olivia Summers?" "You," she said simply. "A life here with you, if you'll have me." In answer, Ethan leaned forward and kissed her gently at first, then with growing intensity as she responded. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the day I brought you here," he confessed. Olivia smiled, feeling truly happy for the first time in years. "What took you so long, Cowboy?" The next few months were a delicate balance of caution and hope. Sheriff Davis sent regular updates. Jasper had been spotted in Nevada, but had evaded capture. The lawyers in Sacramento were optimistic about Olivia's divorce, especially given Jasper's criminal actions. Life at the ranch continued. Olivia's work at the dress shop in Oak Valley had expanded to a full dressmaking business of her own, with orders coming in from as far as San Francisco. Ethan's cattle operation was thriving, and together they had made significant improvements to the house and garden. And through it all, their feelings for each other deepened, transforming from attraction to a profound bond built on mutual respect and shared dreams. Then, 6 months after the attack on the ranch, a telegram arrived from Sheriff Davis. Jasper Kane had been killed in a shootout with lawmen in Nevada while attempting to rob a stagecoach. Olivia received the news with a complex mix of emotions: relief, closure, and a strange sense of sadness for the man who had once seemed to offer her a future. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked that evening, finding her sitting alone on the porch. "Yes," she said after a moment. "I'm free now." Truly free. 3 weeks later, the official documents arrived from Sacramento. Olivia's divorce had been granted posthumously, legally severing any remaining ties to Jasper. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, Ethan took her hand. "I've been waiting for this day," he said softly. "The day when I could ask you properly, with nothing standing between us." From his pocket, he withdrew a small ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond. "I'm not a wealthy man, Olivia, but everything I have is yours already. My home, my heart, my life. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Oak Valley. Ben Taylor stood as Ethan's best man, and Mrs. Peterson from the general store served as Olivia's matron of honor. The entire community turned out to celebrate the union of two people whose story had captivated the region. As they exchanged vows, Olivia thought back to that terrible day in Willits when she had believed her life was over. How wrong she had been. It hadn't been an ending but a beginning, the first step on a journey that had led her to true love and a home she had never dared to dream of. The years that followed were good ones. The Steele Ranch prospered, expanding to include more cattle, better pastures, and eventually a larger house to accommodate their growing family. Olivia's dressmaking business became renowned throughout California, her designs sought after by society women in San Francisco and beyond. Their first child, a son they named James, was born a year after their wedding. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth. Both children grew strong and capable under their parents' loving guidance, learning the values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. Life wasn't without its challenges. Droughts, harsh winters, and market fluctuations tested their resilience. But together, Ethan and Olivia weathered every storm, their bond only strengthening with each obstacle overcome. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the yard, Ethan took Olivia's hand. "You ever think about that day in Willits?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "It seems like another lifetime now." Ethan nodded, his eyes on the horizon where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I told you then that I'd buy you back with my life. I meant it. Every day since, I've tried to be worthy of the gift you gave me when you chose to stay." "Oh, Ethan," Olivia said softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. "We saved each other. That's what love does, it redeems us." As darkness fell and the stars emerged above their ranch, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened young woman sold for a horse to a confident wife, mother, and businesswoman, she had transformed her life through courage and love. And beside her through it all had been Ethan, the cowboy who had recognized her worth when she'd forgotten it herself, the man who had indeed bought her back with his life. Not through death, but through living each day with honor, kindness, and unwavering devotion. In the Wild West of 1876, where survival often came at a terrible price, They had found something rare and precious, a love strong enough to overcome the harshest realities of their time. A love that continued to grow, season after season, year after year, enriching not only their lives but the lives of everyone fortunate enough to witness it. As the evening deepened, and they called their children in for supper, Olivia squeezed Ethan's hand, a silent acknowledgement of all they had built together. From the darkest moment of her life had come her greatest happiness, proof that sometimes the end of one journey is merely the beginning of a far more beautiful one. In the years that followed, the story of Ethan and Olivia Steele became something of a legend in Willits and the surrounding communities. People spoke of the cowboy who had risked everything for a woman he didn't know, and of the woman who had found the strength to build a new life from the ashes of betrayal. Their ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known not only for its fine cattle but for the fairness with which Ethan conducted business. Olivia's dressmaking evolved into a full-fledged design house, with apprentices coming from as far as Boston to learn her techniques. James, their firstborn, grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's quiet strength with his mother's creativity. By his 18th birthday, he was managing large portions of the ranch operations, showing a natural talent for breeding and raising cattle. Elizabeth, their daughter, inherited her mother's skill with needle and thread, along with her father's sharp mind for business. By 15, she was already designing dresses that rivaled her mother's, with plans to study in San Francisco and perhaps even Paris. 2 more children joined the family over the years, another son, William, who showed an early aptitude for medicine, and a second daughter, Sarah, whose sweet singing voice and gentle nature brought joy to everyone she met. Through it all, Ethan and Olivia's love remained the foundation upon which their family and business were built. They never took for granted the second chance they had been given, and their gratitude manifested in countless acts of generosity toward their community. When drought struck the region in 1885, the Steeles opened their land to neighboring ranchers' cattle, sharing precious water from the springs on their property. During the harsh winter of 1888, their home became a shelter for travelers stranded by blizzards. By their 20th anniversary, the small ranch had grown into a considerable estate, with modern improvements that many in California still considered luxuries: indoor plumbing, a telephone line to Oak Valley, even electric lights powered by a generator Ethan had purchased in San Francisco. Yet despite their prosperity, they remained the same at heart. Ethan still rode out with his men to check the herds, and Olivia still designed and sewed special orders with her own hands. They understood that their wealth lay not in possessions, but in the life they had created together. On a warm summer evening in 1898, as they celebrated James's engagement to the daughter of Ben Taylor's oldest son, Olivia found Ethan standing alone by the corral, watching the sunset. "What are you thinking about, my love?" she asked, slipping her arm through his. "How quickly it all passes," he replied, his voice thoughtful. "Seems like yesterday I was riding into Willits, just another cowboy looking to sell some cattle." He turned to her, the lines around his eyes crinkling as he smiled. "Never imagined I'd find the love of my life there." "I certainly never imagined being sold for a horse would lead to all this," Olivia said with a soft laugh. "Life has a strange way of working out." "That it does." Ethan pulled her close. "I promised to buy you back with my life, but the truth is, you're the one who gave me a life worth living." As the celebration continued around them, children laughing, friends talking, music playing, Ethan and Olivia stood together in the golden light of the setting sun, still very much in love after all these years. From the darkest moment of despair had come a lifetime of joy. proof that even in the untamed wilderness of the American West, love could transform everything it touched. Their story, which began with a desperate bargain on a dusty street, had become an epic tale of redemption, courage, and enduring love, a legacy that would inspire generations to come, and a reminder that sometimes the most precious things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. And as night fell over the Steele ranch, stars emerging like diamonds against velvet, Ethan and Olivia walked hand in hand back to the home they had built together, grateful for every step of the journey that had brought them here to this moment, this life, this love that had indeed been worth every sacrifice. For in the end, what greater victory could there be than to look back on a life well lived, surrounded by family and friends, secure in the knowledge that when faced with the darkest of circumstances, they had chosen hope, chosen courage, chosen love, and in doing so had written their own story, one that would be remembered long after they were gone. It was a legacy built not on gold or glory, but on the steady foundation of two hearts that had recognized in each other something worth fighting for, a connection that had defied convention, overcome adversity, and ultimately blossomed into a love story as vast and enduring as the Western landscape itself.